They say love can be a double-edged sword, a force that binds people together or tears them apart. In this story, it led to betrayal, violence, and ultimately death. A man's home should be his sanctuary, but for Donald Mellon, it became the stage for his untimely and shocking demise, all captured on chilling home security footage. Donald Mellon was a self-made millionaire and beloved father of two. But when he met Rebecca Cheever, an exotic dancer with a magnetic allure, his life took a dark and destructive turn. What started as a whirlwind romance quickly spiraled into chaos, marked by escalating fights, substance abuse, and police intervention. The fiery relationship reached its tragic peak one fateful night, when Rebecca pulled the trigger, leaving Donald dead on the floor of their Phoenix mansion. What could drive someone to kill the person they once loved? Was Rebecca's claim of self-defense justified, or was this a calculated act of cold-blooded murder? The answers lie buried in chilling surveillance footage, police reports, and courtroom testimony. Stay with us as we unravel this tragic tale of love, obsession, and betrayal. This is the story of stripper murder's new husband at home, and it's one you won't soon forget. Donald Mellon was a man who seemingly had it all. As the proud owner of several McDonald's franchises in Phoenix, Arizona, Donald had worked his way up from humble beginnings. He was a devoted father to two daughters and a respected figure in his community. To those who knew him, Donald embodied the American dream, hardworking, family-oriented, and driven by a passion for providing for his loved ones. But behind the polished image of a successful businessman lay a man with vulnerabilities. Donald was recovering from a painful divorce, longing for companionship and excitement to fill the void left by a failed marriage. That's when Rebecca Cheever entered his life. Rebecca was the kind of woman who commanded attention wherever she went. An exotic dancer by profession, she had a magnetic charm and an air of mystery that captivated those around her. However, Rebecca's life was anything but glamorous. Struggling with financial instability and a turbulent past, she had developed a tough exterior to survive in a world that often tried to chew her up and spit her out. The two met at a high-end gentleman's club in Scottsdale, where Donald was instantly drawn to Rebecca's fiery personality and striking looks. For Rebecca, Donald represented a way out of her chaotic world, a ticket to stability, wealth, and a new life. The relationship moved quickly, with Donald showering Rebecca with gifts, attention, and promises of a future together. Friends and family raised eyebrows, questioning what a successful businessman saw in someone from Rebecca's background. But Donald didn't care. He was infatuated. Soon, the couple's whirlwind romance led to a lavish wedding that made headlines. Rebecca traded her stage persona for a new identity as Mrs. Mellon, stepping into a world of luxury that few could imagine. Yet the transition wasn't as seamless as it seemed. Behind closed doors, cracks in their relationship began to surface almost immediately. Rebecca's fiery personality, which had once attracted Donald, now became a source of friction. She was no stranger to confrontation, and her temper often clashed with Donald's desire for peace. Meanwhile, Donald, who had always been a grounded man, began to change. Under Rebecca's influence, he adopted a wilder side, one that indulged in heavy drinking, late-night parties, and reckless behavior that contrasted starkly with his former life. Family members noticed the changes in Donald and grew concerned. His once close relationship with his daughters began to fray as they struggled to accept Rebecca. They saw her as an opportunist who was driving a wedge between them and their father. Despite their concerns, Donald was determined to make the relationship work, believing that Rebecca was misunderstood. But what began as a fairy tale soon descended into chaos. As the months wore on, the couple's arguments grew more intense, often spilling out into public view. Police reports would later reveal a troubling pattern of domestic disputes, with multiple 911 calls from their home. Rebecca accused Donald of being controlling and verbally abusive, while Donald confided in friends that Rebecca's erratic behavior was becoming unbearable. Still, the two clung to their toxic relationship, each hoping for change that never came. Rebecca, for all her flaws, had her own demons to battle, while Donald remained torn between his loyalty to her and his growing realization that their marriage was a mistake. This toxic cocktail of passion, manipulation, and unresolved conflicts set the stage for the tragedy that would unfold. The couple's volatile dynamic wasn't just a private matter, it became a ticking time bomb, one that would soon explode with devastating consequences. As the honeymoon phase faded, the cracks in Donald and Rebecca's relationship began to deepen. What initially seemed like an exciting and passionate connection quickly turned into a toxic and volatile bond that neither of them could escape. Donald, who had always been a disciplined and grounded businessman, was slowly being pulled into Rebecca's chaotic world. Under her influence, he adopted a new alter ego, DJ, a version of himself that indulged in excessive drinking, late-night parties, and impulsive decisions. While Donald's friends and family barely recognized him, Rebecca reveled in his transformation. But this new lifestyle came with a heavy price. Arguments between the couple became frequent and explosive, often fueled by alcohol and jealousy. Neighbors reported hearing shouting matches that would last for hours, and police were called to the Mellon home multiple times for domestic disturbances. In one particularly heated incident, Rebecca accused Donald of throwing a glass at her, during an argument while Donald claimed Rebecca had been threatening him with a kitchen knife. These accusations created a toxic pattern, with both parties blaming the other for their escalating conflicts. Despite these alarming signs, the couple stayed together. Donald, perhaps out of pride or denial, refused to admit that his marriage was crumbling. Rebecca, on the other hand, seemed determined to maintain control over Donald and the luxurious life he provided. Friends of the couple later recalled that Rebecca's behavior was often erratic, swinging between affection and hostility. She would shower Donald with love one moment and lash out at him the next, leaving him emotionally drained and confused. Rebecca's temper wasn't her only weapon. She was known to manipulate situations to her advantage, often playing the victim to gain sympathy. During one altercation, she called 911, claiming Donald had threatened her with a gun. When police arrived, Donald denied the accusations, insisting Rebecca was exaggerating to get attention. The officers, unable to determine the truth, filed a report but took no further action. This pattern of conflicting stories and unverified claims made it difficult for authorities to intervene effectively. Meanwhile, Donald's daughters grew increasingly worried about their father's well-being. They could see the toll the relationship was taking on him, both emotionally and physically. Donald confided in them occasionally, admitting that he felt trapped but unsure of how to get out of the marriage. However, his loyalty to Rebecca, and perhaps his fear of the consequences of leaving, kept him from taking any decisive action. As the months went by, Rebecca's grip on Donald tightened. She began to isolate him from his friends and family, accusing them of trying to sabotage their relationship. Donald, torn between his love for his daughters and his commitment to Rebecca, found himself walking a fine line that left him increasingly isolated. But the most damning evidence of their toxic relationship came from their home's security system. Installed by Donald as a precautionary measure, the cameras captured countless incidents of domestic turmoil. Footage showed heated arguments, instances of physical violence, and moments of chilling calm after the storm. In one disturbing clip, Rebecca could be seen throwing objects at Donald, while he stood with his hands raised in an attempt to defuse the situation. Another clip showed Donald shouting in frustration, while Rebecca sat calmly, sipping wine as if unfazed by the chaos. Despite this mounting evidence, Donald and Rebecca seemed locked in a cycle they couldn't break. Friends and family urged Donald to leave, but his response was always the same. "She's complicated, but I love her." Rebecca, for her part, seemed to thrive on the drama, using it as both a weapon and a shield to maintain control. It became increasingly clear that their relationship wasn't just unhealthy, it was dangerous. The constant tension, combined with their volatile personalities, created an environment where violence felt inevitable. And while Donald held on to hope that things might improve, Rebecca's actions suggested otherwise. Her behavior grew more erratic and unpredictable, with incidents of verbal abuse escalating into physical altercations. The stage was set for a tragic confrontation. Both Donald and Rebecca were trapped in a destructive pattern, unable or unwilling to escape. What began as a whirlwind romance had devolved into a toxic battleground, where love and hate blurred into one. The breaking point was just around the corner, and when it came, it would shock everyone who had watched the couple's downward spiral. It was an unremarkable evening on the surface, January 12th, a cool winter night in Phoenix, Arizona. But inside the Mellon residence, tensions that had been simmering for months finally reached their boiling point. This was the night that would end with Donald Mellon's lifeless body on the floor of his living room, and Rebecca Cheever's life permanently altered. Earlier that evening, the couple had been drinking heavily, as was their routine. Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices, though it was nothing unusual. Arguments between Donald and Rebecca were a regular occurrence. What set this night apart, however, was the level of intensity captured on the home's security cameras. Footage from the hours leading up to the shooting shows Rebecca pacing around the living room, visibly agitated. Donald, on the other hand, is seen sitting on the couch with a glass of whiskey in hand, trying to defuse the situation with an air of indifference. The argument appears to escalate as Rebecca moves closer, gesturing wildly, while Donald's attempts to calm her seem to only provoke her further. At approximately 11:30 p.m., Rebecca disappears from the frame. Moments later, she returns, holding a handgun. What happens next is chilling. Donald, now standing, raises his hands in a gesture of surrender. Though the footage has no audio, the tension is palpable. Suddenly, Rebecca raises the gun and fires a single shot. Donald collapses to the floor, clutching his head. But the most disturbing part of the footage isn't the shooting itself. It's what happens afterward. Rebecca doesn't call 911 immediately. Instead, she lights a cigarette, sits down on the couch, and stares at Donald's motionless body. The minutes tick by. 1, then 5, then 10. She finally picks up her phone 23 minutes later and dials 911. Her voice on the call is calm, almost detached, as she reports the incident, claiming that her husband had attacked her, and she had no choice but to shoot him. When paramedics arrived, they found Donald unresponsive, the gunshot wound to his head proving fatal. Rebecca was taken into custody on the spot, her calm demeanor unsettling to the officers who questioned her. She maintained her story. Donald had been abusive, and she feared for her life. However, the voicemail Donald left for his daughters Moments before the shooting would soon cast doubt on her version of events. The voicemail was heartbreaking. In it, Donald's voice trembled as he described the situation unfolding in real time. "She's losing it again," he said, referring to Rebecca. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. If anything happens to me, just know I love you both." The recording abruptly ended with the unmistakable sound of a gunshot, followed by silence. For Donald's daughters, this voicemail wasn't just a final goodbye. It was a haunting reminder of the nightmare their father endured. As investigators pieced together the events of that night, Rebecca's claim of self-defense began to unravel. Forensic analysis revealed that Donald had been shot at close range, and his injuries suggested he was not posing an immediate threat when the gun was fired. The security footage further undermined her story, showing no evidence of the physical attack she described. Instead, it painted a picture of a woman who was in control of the situation, even in the moments after pulling the trigger. The chilling details of that night quickly became headline news. Reporters flocked to the Mellon mansion, eager to capture footage of the home where the crime took place. Neighbors described the couple's tumultuous relationship to the media, painting a portrait of a marriage that was doomed from the start. Meanwhile, Donald's family was left to grapple with their grief, as well as the overwhelming sense of betrayal they felt toward Rebecca. Rebecca's actions during and after the shooting became a focal point of the investigation. Why had she waited so long to call for help? Why was her demeanor so calm and detached when officers arrived? These questions would soon become central to the court proceedings, as prosecutors sought to prove that the shooting was not an act of self-defense but a premeditated murder. By the end of that fateful night, one thing was clear. The toxic relationship between Donald and Rebecca had reached its tragic and inevitable conclusion. The home that was once a symbol of Donald's success had become the scene of his death, and the woman he had loved so deeply was now the prime suspect in his murder. When Rebecca Mellon stood trial for the murder of her husband, Donald Mellon, the courtroom became a battleground of opposing narratives. The prosecution painted a picture of cold-blooded murder, while the defense framed the shooting as a desperate act of self-defense by a battered woman. At the center of it all was the question: was Rebecca a victim, or was she the mastermind of a deadly scheme? The prosecution's case hinged on the chilling home security footage. The video, which captured the shooting and its aftermath, revealed a calm and calculated demeanor that contradicted Rebecca's claims of fear and panic. Prosecutors argued that Rebecca had not acted in self-defense but had instead chosen to end Donald's life during an argument that she escalated. They pointed to the 23-minute delay before Rebecca called 911, during which she smoked a cigarette as her husband lay bleeding on the floor. Prosecutors also emphasized Donald's voicemail to his daughters. The recording, played in court, painted a haunting image of a man who feared for his life. "If anything happens to me," Donald's voice quavered, "just know I love you both." Combined with the forensic evidence which suggested Donald was not attacking Rebecca at the time of the shooting, the prosecution claimed there was no immediate threat to justify her actions. The defense, however, presented a starkly different perspective. Rebecca's attorney argued that she had endured years of verbal, emotional, and physical abuse at the hands of Donald. Police records supported claims of domestic violence, with multiple 911 calls reporting arguments and alleged threats. Rebecca's team claimed that on the night of the shooting, Donald had become aggressive and threatened her with a gun, pushing her to a breaking point. They asserted that Rebecca acted out of sheer terror, believing that her life was in danger. The defense introduced testimony from Rebecca herself, who recounted instances of abuse in vivid detail. She described a man who was charming in public, but volatile behind closed doors, prone to fits of rage when drinking. While the prosecution argued that Rebecca was manipulating the court, the defense claimed her testimony reflected the actions of a traumatized woman who finally snapped. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom remained divided. Was Rebecca a victim of domestic violence, or was this an elaborate defense to mask premeditated murder? The jury's decision would hinge on these conflicting stories, setting the stage for a verdict that would spark debate and controversy. After weeks of testimony, the jury finally delivered their verdict. Rebecca Mellon was guilty of second-degree murder. While the prosecution had pushed for first-degree murder, the defense's portrayal of Rebecca as a victim of prolonged abuse swayed the jury to consider a lesser charge. This decision sent shockwaves through the courtroom, leaving Donald's family devastated and Rebecca's supporters divided. Rebecca accepted a plea deal, agreeing to a 20-year prison sentence in exchange for avoiding a trial on first-degree murder charges. The agreement brought an end to the legal battle but left many questions unanswered. Donald's daughters were vocal in their disappointment, describing the sentence as insufficient for the pain and loss their family had endured. "She stole our father from us," one of them tearfully stated. 20 years doesn't come close to justice. For Rebecca, the plea deal was a lifeline. In an exclusive jailhouse interview after her sentencing, she claimed she didn't remember the details of the shooting. "I was in a haze," she explained, her voice breaking. "I thought he was going to kill me." Rebecca expressed regret for Donald's death but insisted she acted out of fear for her life. To her supporters, this was a story of survival. To her detractors, it was a calculated performance to minimize her punishment. The media frenzy surrounding the case only added to the polarization. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail, while legal analysts debated the merits of the plea deal. The home security footage, in particular, became a focal point of public discussion. Some saw it as clear evidence of premeditation, while others argued it was proof of a woman pushed to her breaking point. The debate extended to online forums and social media, where heated arguments reflected the broader divide in public opinion. Meanwhile, Donald's family focused on preserving his memory. His daughters established a charitable foundation in his honor, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence. If we can help just one person escape a toxic relationship, then at least something good can come from this tragedy, one of them said during a press conference. Though the case was legally resolved, its emotional aftermath lingered. For Donald's family, Rebecca's sentence brought little closure. For Rebecca, the walls of her prison cell were a constant reminder of the night that changed everything. And for the public, the case served as a haunting example of how love can turn deadly. The story of Donald and Rebecca Mellon is as haunting as it is tragic, a tale of love, manipulation, and destruction that ended in the ultimate betrayal. It's a stark reminder of how toxic relationships can spiral into violence, leaving behind irreparable damage for everyone involved. Donald's death wasn't just the loss of a man who worked tirelessly for his family. It was the shattering of a father's bond with his daughters, a community's respect for a self-made businessman, and a cautionary tale for anyone ignoring the warning signs of toxicity. Rebecca's story is equally complex. Was she a victim, driven to extremes by years of alleged abuse? Or was she a calculating woman who exploited her circumstances to justify murder? The jury's verdict, the plea deal, and public opinion all point to the complexities of justice, in cases where love turns deadly. As we reflect on this tragic case, one thing remains clear. Understanding the dynamics of toxic relationships and seeking help early could save lives. If you or someone you know is struggling with domestic violence, please reach out to a support network. It's never too late to ask for help. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories that make you think, question, and reflect.